Hello and welcome to episode 35. We are going to talk about Python's try and except blocks. So this is just a way to handle exceptions, which is if an error occurs in code or an exception, which we call errors in Python, normally that would crash your program and it would generate an error message. You can handle these inside of a try statement to prevent it from completely crashing, and you can even tell it what to do sometimes. This is very useful when we're dealing with asynchronous code, which we'll cover at some point, I think. But if we don't do it in this introduction series, asynchronous code is stuff like API calls and stuff like that, something where you're waiting on a response. And if you don't have the response right away or it times out, you can do that stuff in kind of like a try block or a try catch block in JavaScript or a try except in Python. So really quick, this is just kind of what the syntax looks like. We'll actually go down a little bit. So you notice that this is very similar to kind of like when we use else or other keywords. And you can have it do something like print x, and then if we don't have an x, we have an exception, which is just think of except as another word for error. And then print an exception has occurred. So now if we try to run this, we're already getting an error. You can see it up here because we don't have x defined. But that's the point. So you see that instead of just crashing the whole program and giving us an error message in the terminal, it's actually just returning what we're telling it to return when it encounters this exception. So you know that if we try to just print x, that we'll get that error. So we'll save it up here first just so you can see what the normal error is, right? Which is x is not defined. But with the try block, we're not getting that. And this is crashing a program, right? So sometimes you'll be making a call to an API. You might not get a response. You don't want your entire program to stop running if you're doing that. You want the user to just be notified, or other developers if they mess something up. And you want your program to keep running. The other things that we can add to a try except is we also have else and we also have finally. So we'll cover those and as we get to them, but first I want to cover that you can have as many exception blocks as you want. So if you try to execute some kind of special block of code where maybe there's like different variables involved in whatever you're trying to do, maybe you're trying to print first name and last name, and if first name isn't in here, you can say print please enter your first name. I'm sure a lot of you have noticed those errors before with usernames and passwords on websites. When you get one and it says kind of both, right? Username or password's invalid, and you're kind of wondering which one's invalid. If you're like me ever, maybe you don't remember if you messed up your username or your password. The reason that those are so vague online is to try to make it harder for people with malicious intention to figure out which one is wrong and then just hack one half of that. So if you're ever wondering why developers don't tell you like username or password, they just say both, like username / password is incorrect, that's why. So sorry, that's just a side tangent, but yeah, so you could do another except block here, and you could have something here like name error, right? So if it's a name error, it prints this. Otherwise, this is kind of like the blanket statement, and this one will just say like an x is not defined, we'll just say. And you can see down here when we ran it, remember when we just printed x up top, it returned a name error. So that's what we're telling it to handle now in this except block. We're saying if you see this error, which we will, it should return x is not defined. If it's any other error, something else went wrong. So now we run it, we get x is not defined as expected, which is good. We like when things work as expected. And then like I said, we can also print this else here. So we can do like an else statement and say like it worked fine, or like nothing went wrong, and instead of x here we can just print something like hi. save it, run it, and it says hi, and it worked fine because we didn't get a name error or any error. And again, we could even leave that other except in to catch everything that could go wrong. And then if everything works out, we could have it execute this else block. Now I mentioned a finally block, and it's important to know that the finally block, if specified, so if you have one, it will be executed regardless of if the try block raises an error or not. So this is going to happen either way. So we'll just show that really quick. Save, and obviously we didn't get an error here with hi, so it printed both. We'll save the X, execute again, and you see that we get the error raised, but we also still continue on to the finally block. So again, this could be something that you use on like an API call where you want something else to keep happening, and if you don't get anything back, you still want it to like say something, like even maybe waiting on data or whatever you want it to do. But it can be useful to basically close objects or clean up resources and stuff. Something that you don't want to open, like if you have a file, right? You're trying to open a file, and then you're trying to write to that file. But if you can't write to the file and it messed up, but you opened that file, you still want to make sure you close the file. And we haven't got into handling files, but you always want to make sure that the file gets closed. You don't want to leave files open. So don't worry about the syntax at all, but I'll just kind of show an example of that. So if we have like a file, we'll just call it F, and then you just open, and then the name of the file just be like a demo.txt here, and then we'll try inside of this try block. We're going to write to this file, and if that doesn't work, we want to throw an error. And then, no matter what, we want to make sure that we close that file. If I could type today. So you could have something like this, and then at the end here you could have another exception. Something other than my typing is broken. So just to point out quickly, you might have seen that this was like popping up an error squiggly for the whole time, and that's because we nested all of this other try block. So you can nest try blocks inside outer try blocks, as this one, as you notice, is nested. So we could keep going. We could have this try block with another try block inside of it, and just keep going for whatever meets your needs. But really quick, we should get an error because we don't have a file named demo.txt. So it returns something is broken, so it's returning this one because it didn't even have a chance to try to write anything, because this F open is the very first line of code. This broke, so it didn't even execute anything inside of here. It just skipped it, even though we have this finally. And just to illustrate that, we'll add like a little print in here just to show that the finally block is not executing because it's nested, and the errors are coming right here. So the exception occurs at this line, skips all of these, goes down to this exception. So if we run it, you see it doesn't say I'm finally. So, all right. All right, we're going to move down, and we're going to cover raising an exception. This is outside of a try except finally block. You can raise exceptions just normally in Python, so you can have something like x equals 0 here, and you can just say if x is less than 10, and then you can use this raise keyword, and this is how you raise an exception. And then you capitalize exception, and then put in your error message here. And then if we run it, you see that we're getting this raise exception error message. So it's not saying like a name error like we saw before. It's saying raise exception. So you can do customized error messages for whatever kind of application you're building really easily in Python, and that's very convenient. And just so you know, you can do stuff like a type error or a name error or whatever kind of error you want to put in here, and you just replace the word exception with type error, right? So now we see raise type error. Here is what's returned to the user. And that covers our try except block, and we're going to be moving on to some user inputs and then wrapping up with string formatting, and then we'll get into the file stuff, modules, and probably start diving into machine learning after that. So thank you for hanging in there if you've made it this far, and if you have anything specific that you'd like to cover, any questions or something that I didn't go into in enough detail, please feel free to comment and ask me about them, and I can make a video or even just answer in the comments. Thanks for watching.